Welcome, everyone, to our time together today. This has been a long but exciting journey for Jon and myself. So, 6 conversations, Jon, 6 months.
Yep.
Are you tired yet?
Innovation, talking about innovation doesn't get me tired. It gets me excited. So
Well,
it's
since
been
this is our
great.
our last session, I decided I would wear a tie this morning. So
I'm liking that very much. Yeah, you got a professional. You look like a professor this morning,
do I
JD.
look like a professor? I should I put on my doctoral gown and cap and hood and
There you go. There you go.
Well, hey, I don't know how many of you that are participating with us today have joined us for any of the conversations before, but we'll make a little reference later on to where you can find those videos. They have all been recorded, including this one that we're recording right now. And I hope that you will go back and take time to look at those and use those for future use, but at the same time also for you and your team to be able to talk about matters related to innovation. And it is so good to have you all with us today on this last conversation. You know, Jon and I had talked about what could we do to sort of get a conversation going when it comes to matters related to innovation and mission. And we had tossed some ideas back and forth, and he came up with the idea. I think it was your idea, Jon. It's a good idea, so I'm going to give you credit for it.
Thanks. I
Um,
don't remember if it was mine or not, but
uh,
that's
of,
good.
of us doing 6 live stream webinars, one a month. Over the course of 6 months, and so this is number 6 for us. And part of what we wanted to do in having these conversations is that we wanted to really sort of uh, try to reduce some of the confusion around the notion of innovation. We wanted to, Jon used a phrase, disarm the whole idea that in order to think about innovation, you have to have an MBA or you have to be a professor or something of that nature. And so we wanted to try to help leaders know and recognize the need to be thinking innovatively and to begin to lead in the direction of change in a healthy and biblical way. And at the same time, we wanted to make certain that the conversations that we had were integrated with mission, and so we didn't want it just to exist out there in the realm that you could find information on if you consult a book from any Harvard business publishing house or a group like that, or Forbes or something of that nature. We wanted to make sure we tied it in with solid biblical, theological, missiological foundations, but at the same time, we wanted to make certain that we moved into the realm of the practical as well. And so we wanted to have these conversations so we could help take the theory and try to move it down to the ground level. And Jon's going to introduce our topic today. And this may be one of the most practical sessions that we've had thus far. And at the same time, we wanted to have conversations that we could do live. And so for those that wanted to participate at no cost, that they could participate with their teams, they could write in, ask questions, and make comments. And so that's really sort of the history behind what we have been doing over these past these past 6 months. But I just want to welcome everyone to our last and final conversation, and so thankful that you're with us today. So, Jon, I'll pitch it back to you, brother, on helping us understand a little bit about this journey that we've been on.
Yeah, well, just wanted to quickly summarize, since we're on our last conversation, what we've covered, and then I'll introduce and tee it up for JD to start us off with today's topic. So the first session was about what does kingdom innovation really mean, and we really broke down that idea of innovation in the kingdom and specifically what that looked like. And that was a really fun one, JD. I don't know if
Mhm.
you. It's a while ago now, but I remember it being just a really, really helpful interaction because like you said, so much of what we've heard is out there in the world is just tends to be the basic understanding of innovation and not the integration then with the kingdom. The second one was applying it to how do you do innovation in local context, because so many of us are working out there on specific fields and specific areas of ministry, and we're trying to take these big overarching principles and drive them right down to the ground and figure out how to use them in a very tangible way. The third conversation was about leading ministry teams on kingdom innovation. And that really had to do with what does it mean to be godly leaders and to lead out of humility and love and do innovation when change is required and how challenging change is. And then the fourth was about innovative listening. What does it mean to listen as we innovate in the kingdom? And what does listening look like, both listening to our teams and listening to our audiences that we're trying to reach? And then the last one we did was from vision to reality, really acting on your idea. What does it mean to apply or implement your innovation in a very, very practical way? And how we wanted to kind of summarize and bring it all together was now with this final session, which is a case study from you, JD, and from me, where we simply describe something we've actually done and applying some of these principles from these last sessions to something that we've actually done. And then opening it up to you all to ask questions, share some of the things you've learned, and be a part of that conversation. And so kind of pitch it over to you to be our first case study.
Yeah, and basically what we wanted to do was to try to give a couple different perspectives on the way that we have applied or have attempted to apply some of these concepts we've been talking about. One case study related to the local church, and another case study related more to the agency. And so I'm going to share first about a case study that's based on one of the churches that I served for 6 years before coming to Samford University. The Lord called me out of seminary education. I've been teaching for many years at a seminary in Louisville, Kentucky, at Southern Seminary, and came on to the pastoral staff team with the church at Brook Hills in Birmingham, Alabama, and served as one of the mission pastors for 6 years with that congregation. And so what I'm going to share with you for just the next few minutes is related to my time there, and one specific thing that I had the honor of being able to help lead our church in was in helping the congregation understand that within a North American context, the United States is actually home to the third largest number of unreached people groups in the world, and to begin to mobilize our people in church planting teams to engage them and plant churches among them. And so that's basically the case study I'm going to share with you. Now, John and I, have covered a lot of territory in these conversations, so we're not going to be able to hit every single thing that we've talked about, but we're going to try to hit some of the principles and some of the ideas that we've been advocating. Let me kind of give a verse to sort of start this case study off. So one of the verses that I think is important to keep in mind, and there's so many that are out there, is it's coming from Proverbs chapter 19, verse 21. And that's the passage that says, many are the plans in the mind of a man, but it is the purpose of the Lord that will stand. And so one of the things that I hope that you hear me say in this time sharing this case study is that we've got to make certain that we don't create and put strategies and ideas and thoughts together and then take them to God and say, God, we want you to bless this. But rather, we want to understand, God, what is your purpose? What is your will? What do you want for us? And then, Lord, give us grace to draw those desires out of our hearts as our hearts are united to yours. And so with that in mind, let me just kind of give you a little bit of background. And I'm just going to sort of throw out some of the concepts and principles and then just talk about how I applied them, John. And John, you may even have some questions for me, during this time. So feel free to, even interrupt me or stop me. But the first one that John and I have talked about is this issue of creating a culture of innovation. Now, when I stepped into the role as one of the pastors with the church, I was not involved in a new ministry. The church had been around for many years, and the present senior pastor at the time was David Platt, who's no longer with the church at Brook Hills. He went to the International Mission Board for 4 years, and now he's pastoring in the D.C., Virginia area right now. But David had been there a few years already, and so he had created, by God's grace, this culture of expectation whereby there was an openness to innovation. So I wasn't up against rolling a huge boulder up a hill. In other words, he had come in, he had established a very healthy biblical foundation, theological foundation, to think about how we do ministry as a church in light of the greatest spiritual and physical needs in the world. And so what was in place, though, that was the challenge, was that for the church, mainly the notion of missions was still seen as overseas among unreached people groups and in inner city Birmingham. And there was really nothing in between. And there was no concept of really thinking about unreached people groups in North America, in the United States, or even in Birmingham. And what church planting activities the church had been involved in the United States was like the predominant approach of going out to plant and pastor among reached people groups, which is what most churches and most agencies are doing and have been doing within North America. So there wasn't really a focus on reaching unreached people groups, taking a more apostolic approach to planting church among them. Now, Platt had established a good, healthy biblical foundation. Innovative culture was there, but at the same time, there was another missions pastor. I was one of 3 missions pastors on staff. It's definitely a different setup because our pastoral staff team had 10 people on it, and 3 of those were mission pastors. And
Wow.
so most unusual structure of leadership. But Jonathan Bean was the global mission pastor, and he and David had worked very closely together to establish this notion about highest priority on unreached people groups and being involved in church planting. So I walked into an environment where there was that culture, that atmosphere that was already there, but there was that gap between our city and the world and the notion of unreached people groups. So the second thing John and I talked about over the past few months has been the issue of helping people catch a vision. So one of the things that I realized was that in order for people to catch a vision, they need to get out and see the reality of lostness. So what we did one Saturday, I invited an individual to come in from the International Mission Board to do some training with our people on how to study an area, study a community, to identify different people groups. And so we had about 40 people together one Saturday afternoon. We went out onto the streets of Birmingham, Alabama, here in the Deep South, and we went to marketplaces, we went to restaurants, we went to temples, places of worship, various apartment communities to try to identify who are the people that are living in our city. And so out of 40 people, 4 hours on the streets of Birmingham, we come back and we had encountered 34 different people groups in Birmingham, Alabama, just in 4 hours of being out on the streets. Now, what's fascinating is that when you looked at those 34 people groups, we wrote all their names on a whiteboard, and we compared them with people group lists on a global scale. Most of those people groups that we identified in Birmingham represented unreached people groups somewhere else in the world. And from what we could tell, most of those were unengaged in Birmingham. So it was sort of this aha moment to a lot of our people that they did not realize that this was indeed the case in our own city. And then as I began to tell stories of other cities across the United States and across Canada, people began to realize, okay, there is something going on here. And they began to see the need for a vision to engage and to plant churches among them. Then another thing that John and I talked about, and I'll build off of that little Saturday activity, we talked about a thing called applying the Big Five. And the Big Five was basically helping people think about asking good questions, responding with healthy answers, applying wise action steps, evaluating everything, and praying with diligence. And so what I did was I tried to apply those Big Five concepts to what we were doing with our people. So they've been out in the streets. They had basically now caught a small vision of the reality. And so I began to just ask them the question, now that we know these people groups are here, what next? What is the Spirit leading us to do? How would the Lord have us to respond? And then we began to talk about, okay, so what are some healthy answers? One of those healthy answers to that question was for us to have an interest meeting. So we invited our church to come and attend. We had several people show up. We told them what we discovered. We told them about the realities in the city. And I challenged the people to think about forming teams, forming church planting teams. They wouldn't be leaving our church, but forming church planting teams to commit 1 year to seek to engage and plant churches among an unreached people group. Then we began to divide those teams up into fours and fives. There were about 50 people that made a commitment, and we began to give them some training, monthly meetings to celebrate. And then the notion of evaluating everything, we were evaluating it with quite a great deal of diligence in that process. Of course, John, we came up with all these challenges along the way. I quickly found out that you could tell people to go work among this people group where there are no believers and say, okay, maybe by God's grace, if you and your team of 3 could see 6 people come to faith at the end of the year, what do you need to do, right now, in the next 12 months? And most people would look at you like, deer in the headlights, and they wouldn't know what to do. And so they had a hard time thinking through that, which required us, creating that environment of grace that you and I've talked about when it comes to innovating. You have to be patient with people. You have to walk them through it. And so, so let me leave you with just some what happened as a result of that process. So we did it for a year. And at the end of that year, the results that we came up with here in Birmingham is that we had some people, and these are kind of some spinoffs that we couldn't predict from doing something innovative like this, but we had some people that actually partnered with these teams and got some training doing cross-cultural work in our city that actually prepared them to leave the country to go into other parts of the world to work among unreached people groups. We had one particular team that after the other teams disbanded, one team continued on for another 2 to 3 years. And that team eventually morphed into something, again, that was really unpredictable, but really exciting. And that is that team began to be led by a staff member of our church, and they started a ministry called Birmingham Gospel Outreach. And that continues to this day. It's been going on for 4 or 5 years. And what they do is they get together each month. It's not just for our church. They invite other churches to come in. They do evangelism training, usually using the 3 circles methods. They're teaching 4 fields methodology. And then they go out on the streets of Birmingham and go door to door to pray with people and to share the gospel with people. Also, out of that 1-year innovative pilot that we were engaging in, ESL classes were started with many of the UPGs in our city. And people began to realize that unreached people groups were no longer seen just outside of North America, but also in North America. Also in that process, we had 2 teams to go into other parts of the United States to work among unreached people groups up in New Jersey and also in Detroit. So that's a lot in just a very short period of time. But that was an example of how I tried to apply some of these things that John and I have been talking about over the past several months. And again, it doesn't always go smoothly. Ran into all kinds of challenges, all kinds of barriers. We had to create many strategies to overcome, like we talked about last month. But things came out of it. The Lord was using things that we could not have scripted, we could not have planned for, and it was very much an encouraging and good ministry to move into, even though it did not end the way that I wanted it to end. I wanted to see, 5 churches planted among these 5 different people groups that we had 5 teams working among. That did not happen, but there were a lot of other things that happened that continued to progress down the road. So really, really encouraging.
Very cool. I have 2 questions that jumped to my mind, JD, real quick. How, as you were working on this innovative effort, you mentioned that there were 3 missions pastors among this pastoral staff.
Mm-hmm.
What did the other missions pastors think of this initiative? How did it sync with what they were doing? What was that dynamic like?
Yes, they were very encouraged by it because all of the pastoral staff team knew that I would be bringing that aspect to the team in the early days of my ministry there. And so I was able to work closely with our global disciple making pastor in training our people, helping them think about contextualization in our backyard, learning culture and context, and then working with our at the time his title was the local local missions pastor, and helping him work with us and think about certain areas of our city, inner city Birmingham, where these opportunities existed. And so very supportive. We tried very diligently to not work in silos, even with this pilot initiative, but to try to collaborate together as best we possibly could, even though I was shouldering most of the load on this. But it was a very good relationship together.
Well, that's great. And then What were some of the maybe the challenges that you run into cross culturally for the Brook Hills membership or people involved, right? You know, they were obviously in their own city, but they're engaging with another
Mhm.
culture, and of course that creates all kinds of dynamics that they might not expect. Anything that comes up
Yeah.
there that that jumps out to you that maybe is worth sharing?
Well, surprisingly, I don't think there were a lot of faux pas that occurred. I'm sure there were some. Many of the people that had been involved, and this kind of goes back to that culture of innovation, that biblical missiological foundation that had been established before I arrived by the senior pastor, and that is many of those people had been on short-term trips, and so our global disciple making pastor had trained people to think about culture and context outside of North America as they went on these trips, because the church was doing excellent training, continues to do excellent training with short-term teams that go. And so they came home. The challenge for them was just to think about, how do I apply this in my context? And I
Mm-hmm.
think one of the biggest things was just people learning how to change their routines. And not be so isolated and not always walk the same or drive the same paths that we do every day, but we had to get out of our comfort zones. I think that was one of the biggest challenges to a lot of the people, as opposed to just your general typical, suburban middle class, you know, southern city, group of folks. And what we do, we really had to get outside of a bubble that we feel very comfortable in.
Gotcha. No, that's interesting that that one of the big challenges would be not so much the cultural, because like you said, there was already a culture that was there that had kind of primed you
That's right.
for
Yeah.
that initiative, but really more of kind of this kind of routine that Americans get into,
Hmm.
and to do something innovative, they had to break their routine. And I think that's a
Yeah.
great point in general about innovation, that to innovate, we do have to look at the ways we do things and say, are we willing to try doing it differently
Hmm.
in
Yeah.
order
And
to see a different result?
it's something that was really fascinating. There were two senior adult ladies that had actually gone out with us on this 4-hour excursion, and then they realized that there had been nail salons that they went to where most of the women there were from Vietnam and did not speak English, or did not
Mm-hmm.
speak English very well. So these two ladies, without coming to me for permission, which was wonderful, really sensed that the Lord wanted them to reach out and minister to these ladies. And so these two women, they go to the owner of the shop and they volunteer their time and said, "Hey, could we come in early before you open shop, and could we do some ESL training with these women in your store, and just teach them how to improve
Wow.
in their language?" The man wanted to pay them, and they said, "No, we don't want anything. We're just, we're followers of Jesus, and we just want to share the love of Christ with you and your coworkers, and we want to help you in this, transition to life here in Birmingham and what you're doing." And so for several months, they were going in and just building relationships with these women and just doing ESL. And again, it was not scripted. It wasn't planned. It just came out of looking and seeing, what Lord, what's your purpose here in this situation, and let's let your desire, trump everything else, and not so much, our plans. But it was just really cool to see that.
Oh, that's awesome. What a great example of taking that innovative culture and giving people a framework, and then allowing them to apply it to their daily routine, and seeing that they were meeting people from other cultures that they could connect with very easily.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
It's a
Very
great
cool.
example.
So, John, you've got a case study from a different perspective. So,
Yeah.
can you tell us a little bit about what you've done?
Yeah, I want to share a little bit about what I'm doing right now in my role with SIL International for my case study. And many of you out there will be familiar with SIL mostly because of its partnership with Wycliffe Bible Translators and with the Seed Company and the Bible Societies to do Bible translation. And that's been a major part of what SIL has done over the years. It's a key component of its work. But a thing to maybe note about SIL is that its mission is actually broader and more holistic than the Bible translation piece only. Its mission really is to help language communities thrive and flourish using their language. So
Hmm.
there's a lot of work being done. It's more looks a little more like community development, literacy, education, linguistics, that all, of course, support and make the Bible translation even more impactful. So SIL's got this very broad mission, and I was brought into the innovation team full time last year So it's been about a year since I've been there. It's gone by pretty quickly. Um, and um, and I was really brought in to work on a very specific innovation challenge. And that innovation challenge was to say, how do we design a program that connects the needs and passions of people in the United States around literacy and education with the needs and passions of people in local language communities around education and literacy. How do we do that? What does that look like? Because we've had really dynamic and cool programs around connecting people in the United States around Bible translation and
Right.
the needs around the world, but we just haven't had quite the same thing in the area of literacy and education. And so that was a real need that SIL had, and so that's one of the things they asked me to do. And so I want to share this morning a little bit about the process. Now we're not in the sense that, like, JD, you kind of shared, hey, I kind of wrapped up my time here. Here's what we did. I'm right in the middle of it, right? I'm only like 2 or 3 steps in, so I'm going to share a little bit more of an in-process case study, but a lot of lessons to learn out of that as well.
Good.
And as I was thinking a little bit about a kind of a great scriptural passage that kind of has anchored my time at SIL and in the work. I think about the story of Caleb, Joshua and Caleb. They were sent into the land, right? Moses
Mm-hmm.
sent them in, and I want you to hear some of the things that he says in Numbers. Moses says things he wanted them to study. He says, "Go up through the Negev and into the hill country. See what the land is like, whether the people who live there are strong or weak, few or many. What kind of land do they live in? Is it good or bad? What kinds of towns do they live in? Are they unwalled or fortified? How is the soil? Is it fertile or poor? Are there trees or not? Do your best to bring back fruit from the land." And in parentheses it says, because this was the season of the first ripe grapes. And of course, that's where we get the Sunday school pictures of the really, really big grapes on the
Yeah.
stick, that we're
Yeah.
all familiar with from our days in Sunday school. But think about what Moses was asking. Moses
Mm-hmm.
was asking about population, sociology, resources, social dynamics, the posture towards risk, fortified cities and that sort of thing, the fruitfulness of the land, the ecosystems of trees and all these things. When he sent Joshua and Caleb in, he sent them in, to find out really, really specific things. He wasn't just saying, generally, what's your sense for the place, right? He was asking these specific questions. And JD, as you and I have talked, we've talked a lot about in conversation before, a lot about listening and understanding our audience. And so Moses was asking Joshua and Caleb those kind of things. Um, and then I think about in the Joshua Caleb story how when they came out back to the people, um, they um, they essentially had to live out something that in SIO we call gracious tenacity. This idea that you have to lead people through change in a humble and in a faithful and in a gracious but also tenacious way. I think about Caleb. Here they come out and they say, "Hey, Israelites, here's what we need to do." The Israelites weren't ready for that for a lot of reasons. And if you look at Caleb's story, he lived through the entire wilderness experience, and then once Joshua becomes the leader and they move into the promised land, and Joshua's ready to break out the land and say, "Hey, you conquer this area, you conquer this area." He goes to Caleb and says, "Hey, Caleb, you ready to do what Moses had asked you to do?" And Caleb says, "I was 40 when we had this conversation last time. I'm 80 now. I'm just as ready as ever. Give me that hill country."
Mm-hmm.
Right? He was tenacious. But my sense is that if he was still a leader in the people of Israel, he was also gracious.
Mm-hmm.
He accepted that the Israelites as a people had to go through a longer process, right?
Mm-hmm.
And whenever you do innovation work within a large organization like I'm doing within SIL, it's going to be a long process. You're going to be bringing people along, talking, having discussions, interacting, thinking about it from their perspective. And that's the other thing that we talked a lot about.
Yeah.
So I want to kind of tackle that a little bit here in a minute. Essentially, I want to describe, first of all, what I was asked to do and kind of the steps I went through and then how I applied those things that I just mentioned. So we were, again, talking about the literacy and what we call multilingual education area. We work a lot with around the world with children in first to third grade, where we're really challenging local school systems to allow them to go to school in their local language for the first 3 years of school. Because what the research shows is that their long-term educational outcomes are way better if they learn how to learn in the language they learned at
Mm-hmm.
home before they switch over to the trade language or the national language. And so this is a really, really important area for long-term success of those kids and long-term viability of those languages. And so
Yeah.
in that area, they said, what would it look like to have a program that really reinforced and provided for that kind of work happening around the world? And so what did we do? We started by doing a lot of listening. And I listened in three ways. I listened to our internal people. You know, what were the opportunities? What were the challenges? What were the needs? I spent hundreds of hours talking to everyone I could talk to, you know, and I use Zoom a lot, you know, for video calls. So I was
Mm-hmm.
talking to Ethiopia. I was talking to the Philippines. I was talking to all these places and saying, what is the situation? What are the dynamics? And then we needed to listen to the audiences that we wanted to reach, right? So now I'll talk about a little bit more about the US audience. We had to decide who in America cares about languages, right? Well, that's not just everybody in America,
Mm-hmm.
right? We had to develop what we call a persona, right? Where we said, of the over 300 million Americans out there, who are the Americans that would be most interested in partnering with SIL to grow in their understanding of the languages of the world, as well as to support these language communities around the world? And that required focus groups and surveys. And what we came down to was we were able to identify 60 million people between the age of 30 and 50 that we call the intellectually curious American. And we've got a whole big list of what they're like, what they don't like, what they care about. And now we know that that's the group of people that we need to be looking to partner with. And here's what we found though. We also need to be looking at what are the needs of those local language communities? Because we're not doing ministry to people.
Mm-hmm.
We are going from everywhere to everywhere, and we are doing ministry with people, right? And so we really have not only our internal audiences that we have to listen to, not only the US audience of people that we need to find out who cares about language, but what are the needs of these local language communities in the area of literacy and multilingual education? And here's the cool thing. We found that there was a synchronous need or a common need. And that was between all three of those audiences, a realization that it seems impractical to educate children in a language that they don't need for high school, but we know it's important. And so we realized that there was a common barrier to doing what we know is the right thing
Mm-hmm.
by the US donor, by the parent in the local community, and even by a lot of SIL staff members of going, how do we get the work done the quickest? And so we said, what could we do to overcome that challenge that would help everybody? And we realized that one of the ways we could do that was by creating, essentially linking the learning to social issues like clean water or like gender equality, you know, elevating the role of women in their community, or things like environmental conservation or poverty alleviation. And what we found is by linking these educational and local language goals to a social issue that other people cared about for other reasons, we could dramatically increase the level of engagement,
Hmm.
both internally within SIL,
Well,
within the local language community, the local leaders and parents, and within the donor community,
hmm.
and create a reason to do something that was harder to grasp but really needed. And so with that breakthrough, we designed a little program, and you can all visit it. It's called bethescript.org. So
BE, like the BE or the letter B?
yep, BE and then the word the and then script.org.
Oh, okay.
And it's just a little prototype that we did in Kenya to test this out in a local language community, the Duruma people in southeastern Kenya. And then we've developed 3 US products that allow US donors to engage and get involved. And so through that process, we learned to listen, right? We learned to listen all around. We had some faux pas there where we thought we had listened well. Then we realized we missed the mark, and we just had to go,
Hmm.
hey, we missed it. We didn't understand. We had to go back. Let's listen some more, or hey, trust us that we're committed to listening, and we'll listen more in the next round.
Hmm.
And then we had to kind of develop out this prototype. One of the things that I'll mention before I wrap up my time is one of the most critical things besides listening and besides graciously and tenaciously leading is one of the ways you do that is by developing what I've described before in some of our sessions, a minimally viable product. You have to produce something. Because what I found is in leading people on innovation work and in listening, a lot of people don't listen to 30,000-foot ideas very well. They have
Hmm.
trouble even conceptualizing what you're talking about. So you've got to go through this process of leading people down the road, listening to them. But then at some point, you've got to just say, hey, let me develop something and
Hmm.
show you what I mean. And then let me listen more. And then let me hear more. And then let me consider more. And so it's this process of listening, processing, developing. And so the process we're in now is we've developed a minimally viable product. We've tested the process through. We don't know if it's going to work or not, right? We're still evaluating all that, but now we're able to go back and listen. And I just finished surveying 300 US potential donors
Wow.
and saying, what do you think of this idea? Do you like it? Would you buy it? Would you give to it? You know, would it be better if it was this color, or would it be better if it was this price, or would it be better if it focused on this issue, or those sorts of things?
Hmm.
And so it's an iterative process that you have to go through. So even though we've got this little bethescript.org, and you might go there and go, oh, they've launched it. Actually, it's a basic thing. What we launch next year when we do our pilots in 2 countries might look totally different.
Hmm.
And that's totally okay. We're not
Hmm.
worried about that at all. So that's kind of a little story of our journey from a challenge to developing a prototype.
Man, that is great, John. And one of the things that I'm most impressed with is just how much of an importance that you have placed on understanding. I'll just say the context. In other words, the people you're working with, believers that you're partnering with, community people, the social cultural factors that are there. I mean, that's just fantastic. One big question comes to my mind because I know we want to open it for Q&A from the other folks. But one big question comes to my mind is your innovation process obviously was not something quick and overnight, and it's still, as you mentioned, it's still going on. I mean, this must require a lot of patience, and so I guess I'm wondering, how then do you, as an individual, and then maybe the team you're working with, when you're doing something over this long period of time, before you begin to see things kind of make change on the ground, how do you where do you find the encouragement? How
Mm.
do you measure the progress? How do you have the moments of celebration? Because I know you need to have that celebration as you're going through the journey. Um, well, this is great. I'm just trying to think about, man, I pray God give me patience and give it to me now. I mean, that's my way of thinking. So tell
No, that's
us
right.
about that.
Well, first thing is I have a great innovation team I'm a part of, and we meet weekly and we share what we're going through,
Hmm.
our successes and our challenges. We pray together, so that's key. Um, the other thing is that I've learned in my 20 years of doing innovation work where I get energy, and I've balanced my load. Um, so one of the ways I get energy as a person is by consulting and encouraging and supporting others in innovation. So my portfolio in SIL is actually divided. Half of my work is consulting with reverse innovation projects, where I'm serving and supporting people doing innovation work on the field.
Hmm.
And so that just encourages me and helps me and gives me new ideas because it
Yeah.
allows me to think about someone else's issue other than my own challenges. And so I
Yeah.
think one of the key ways I do it is by realizing where I get energy and not only doing things that sometimes get me stuck. When you're in the
Mm-hmm.
middle of rolling out a 1 to 3 year innovation program, which this project, if it's successful, will take 3 to 5 years before it's
Yeah,
really
yeah,
sustainable. And so that helps me to unplug from the grind of that project and do some things over in another area. And even these
that's
webinars that we're
good.
doing here have been huge in that,
That's
in
good.
helping
I mean,
me encourage others.
yeah, I think that's just a great, healthy reminder, not for us to put all of our, if I can use the metaphor, eggs in one basket as we use here in the States. Um, and 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 just focus on this one thing that may take a long time, but what are several things that we could be moving on that would allow us to use our gifts, our passions, our talents. So you've
Right.
got a team that really then understands the long haul of the journey, right?
Yeah, that's one thing I've been really impressed. I think one of the
Good.
things that has been a piece of this of the reason why SIL is having some success in innovation is that they one of the things that my boss that I work with, which I really appreciate what he says. He says the key metric to innovation is not hitting your numbers or getting revenue or seeing people come to know Christ. In that innovation stage, it's what you learn. It's your
Mm,
metric
mm,
learning, and I think SIL has done a really good job of putting itself in a posture of learning through its innovation work.
that's good.
So it's looking at the long haul and not looking at, hey, did we, is it successful in the next, 6 months? Because
Yeah.
innovation is going to take years. It's not going to take 6 months,
And,
right?
and, and I'll just ask one more last question, then maybe we can open it up to some people. So, like
Yep.
people that would be like your supporters, those outside the organization that you're wanting to partner with what you're doing. Is it hard to bring them along when it's a 3 to 5 year journey?
Um, you know, um, no, I don't think it is because a lot of the people that we're talking to um, can see the problem that we're addressing and the core challenge.
Hmm.
And they trust SIL because SIL's been around for 85 years doing this kind of work. And they really appreciate the fact that SIL is tackling some of these really sticky and difficult things, like how do you fund and make relevant long-term educational programs, right? How
Yeah,
does that
yeah,
work? And so they're really glad to see SIL tackling that. And so I have found great willingness of partners and other people to go, you know what, keep us informed or
mm,
let us know how we can help because they're just happy that some people who have been around a while are willing to throw resources at innovation in those areas.
yeah. That's great.
Yep.
Fantastic. Very
Yeah.
good.
All right. Well, let's open it up to questions. We got about 15 minutes here, and JD and I will have a few final announcements about next steps after this series. But go ahead and type in the chat box in the bottom right if you have a question for JD or I about our case studies, or even if you have a comment, or maybe
Or even
you
about my tie.
that's right. If you like JD's tie, you want to vote on that. If you, or even if you have just a general question about innovation, we'd love to take a few moments and answer a few of those. So feel free to type those in at the bottom right. Um, and we'll, as we wait for those, JD, maybe talk about your podcast for a minute while we wait for some questions to come in and
Yeah.
share about
So
that.
So I've been doing a podcast for 5 seasons now called Strike the Match with JD Payne, and John and I just did an interview just recently, and the plan is to post it, Lord willing, on November the 1st, and basically it's just kind of us reflecting on these 6 conversations. Of course, at the time we recorded the interview is after conversation number 5, so last month, but it's basically us just kind of reflecting on what have we learned, what's the Lord been saying to us, and just some thoughts moving forward. So if you want to check that out, go to whatever listening device that you use to listen podcasts on, and just search for Strike the Match with JD Payne, or you can just Google Strike the Match JD Payne, and you can find it there. And so don't hide, subscribe while you're there. So.
Yes, and I'll encourage you. It's a JD does a great job. It's very
You're
professional,
very
very
kind. Thank you.
very well done, and great people on there. Just lots of diverse people in the area of mission and missiology and thinking in those ways. So um, I'll share one thing, and we've got someone typing a comment right now. So I'll share one thing, and then we'll handle that one that comes in, and that is that one of the things for you to be thinking about next, and you'll be hearing about this more, is that we'll be taking a break from our monthly events related to innovation and mission. Um, but what we will be doing early next year is launching a few follow-up events that will be leading up to Innovation and Mission's annual online event. So every April, I do an event called Innovation and Mission. It's an annual web event. It's about 90 minutes long. Has some great speakers. If you go to innovationandmission.com, you can check out the last 2 years worth of speakers and hear what they said. Great stuff. And every year we have a theme. And welcome Lauren, entering from Chiang Mai. Lauren, we're allowing people to ask questions about innovation. So if you have any questions you want to ask, feel free to ask them. Every year we've had a theme, and what we've been trying to do is discern from the Spirit, where is the global church and the missions movement in relation to innovation, and how do we pick a theme that really helps the global church to tackle what it needs to tackle next? So year one was really about building a culture of innovation. That was 2018. Our sense was we really needed to help the missions movement think about how to build a culture of innovation within their organization. So that was year one. Year two, which was last year, was called Getting Things Done. It was really a very, very practical discussion about how do you implement innovation. And we had some wonderful speakers who were doing that on a daily basis. And that was really, really good. And so I'd like to announce the theme for next year, which is measuring innovation. Because now what we're seeing is we're seeing a lot of people trying innovation and really not knowing how to measure success in their innovation work. This is a really important topic. And right now there's a lot of good work being done, scholarly work being done in that area. And so we're going to bring together a faculty of people who really can speak to this area of innovation. Marcel's asking about the archives of past webinars. Yes, Marcel, if you go to innovationandmission.com or kingdominnovation.info, you can get all the archives, and they're all on YouTube, but you can access them through those two websites. Absolutely. So Phil has a question, JD. He says, thinking of your case, is innovation driven from the USA or driven more globally? Given that SIL is global, how are innovation ideas received when driven from other parts of the organization? Phil, you have asked the core question that every mission agency is dealing with, and this is the core question that SIL is dealing with. So it is you went right to the heart of the matter, and the question is, with innovation, how do you balance what we call reverse innovation, which is innovation from the grassroots up, versus strategic innovation, which is innovation that is organization-wide and looking at whole areas of work that maybe cross various contexts, right? Mm-hmm. And what I would say is that every organization needs to have a diverse portfolio of innovation work that mixes these two. And it's simply because there are times when a global 30,000-foot view and approach catches approaches and ways of doing things that are absolutely critical. And there are times that extremely localized view, what's happening in one community, in one situation, is absolutely critical. It is not one or the other, it's both. The question is, do you create an innovation environment that celebrates both? We're trying to do that in SIL. It's not being done perfectly. There's times when it feels like the global is the key and everyone's talking about the big global one. There's times when everyone's talking about these local ones. And what we're trying to get to is this balance where we say, hey, in some situations like my program, we want it to scale globally. So it's got to have some global components to it. It's also got to have local application. Mm-hmm. There's other examples where, really the local is the key and it doesn't need to scale globally. It just needs to work really well locally. And we're trying to celebrate both. JD, what comes to your mind?
Something that comes to my mind is that I think there's a reciprocal relationship there, and that is there's an influence on both sides. So those that are, to use Phil's comments here, innovation that's coming from the U.S. is going to be influenced and to go through that iteration process after reflecting on what's happening in other contexts throughout the majority world. That's going to affect the way we think about things here. and then vice versa. The challenge we talked about in a previous conversation was not being paternalistic, but that's good life in the kingdom. Just allowing, the work of the Spirit in different parts of the world, different cultures and contexts to influence others, and then think contextually about what they do. Even if you think about just missiology, that's influenced even North American work. A good deal of it was birthed out of other parts of the world, studying other parts of the world. Now, sometimes the way it was applied in the United States in the 80s and 90s, and in Canada as well, wasn't exactly what the original missiologist had in mind. But there's a reciprocal relationship that's very important.
Yeah, one thing that I think we're talking a lot about these days is the distinction between um, polycentricism
Right.
that has been advocated in the more networked global church decentralized part of the discussion about missions, and what we're seeing more in the geopolitical space, which is being called multipolar.
Mm-hmm.
And multipolar thinking, different than polycentric, is essentially saying there are multiple ways of looking at the world, and they will not be cohesive. They will actually be in contrast to each other and fighting each other, and that the world is entering one of those times. I think one of the great challenges we're going to have is polycentric thinking, where there's multiple centers all adding value, is really appropriate in the decentralized global church as a movement. It's very, very hard to enact or make practical in an organization with organizational structures. Now, that doesn't mean we have to go back to old hierarchical, central, or go back to the member-led where, it's everything by committee. I think there's some 21st century new ways of thinking about it. But that kind of leads into this. Let's go to the next question from
Yeah, I
Alex.
think Alex's question, it relates to something that you had mentioned a moment ago, John. When you choose to invest in reverse innovations, how do you adopt them globally and or make them strategic?
Mm. Yeah, I think one of the ways you do that is by highlighting them. One of the things that we're doing within SIL is we have what we call the Revenue Catalyst Network. It's a network of people from all over the world who are doing different innovation projects and trying new revenue models. And we're actually highlighting different revenue catalysts, what they're trying, what they're learning. So you elevate a local innovation to the global stage, and you allow the global stage to learn from the local. I don't know, JD, when you think about how that happened in Brook Hills, when you have like the ladies in the hair salon
Yeah.
versus people doing other things, did you see that kind of real localized trying out things and how it influenced others?
Very much so. So, there's definitely more of that grassroots kind of approach, that came out of a lot of what we did. That things were happening that I did not plan or script, and sometimes I didn't even know it was happening until a month or two later, based
Sure.
on just what people saw. But at the same time, and this kind of goes back to what I was mentioning a moment ago about the reciprocal relationship, just on a smaller scale, we didn't have models to look at, and so. Even to this day, there are very, very few churches in North America that are seeking to plant churches among unengaged, unreached people groups in North America. Though things have changed within the past 5 years. At that time, there were very few models, and so much of what I was laying out was really sort of a top-down approach. But then, after things got moving forward, there were a lot of things that were happening at the grassroots level. And so you did begin to see some of these things develop and come out of the people as they engaged others in the field.
Yeah. I think one of the things, to Alex's question as well about competing strategic and innovations, is I think part of the challenge goes to the way we design our innovation, right? One of the things that I've been challenged with and am working towards is to design global programs, innovation programs, that set out some strategic and innovative approaches at a macro level, but leave a lot of room locally for
Mm-hmm.
re-engineering to make it work locally. So I'm almost imagining what I'm hoping is going to happen over time, and who knows if this will work, right? We're just trying new stuff here, but I'm hoping to design a structure that will be innovative at the global level and trying new things at the global level, but will allow tons of micro kind of micro reverse innovation things as it's applied locally in lots of different ways.
Hmm.
And so my hope would be, let's say that this program is successful and there are, 50 implementations of it across, 10 countries in 5 years or something, that they would be able to get together and say, look how we did it in this country. And it might look really, really different, but at the global level, it's still accomplishing the same big objective,
Right.
right? So
Yeah.
I think there are some ways to do that. Again, whenever you do something that's a hybrid, it's always fraught with danger because it
That's
requires a
exactly right.
lot of nuance, right?
That's exactly right.
Yep, yep.
We're almost at the top of the hour. John, I know we got just a couple announcement questions to leave everyone with. One of the things that I would want to challenge you that are participating to think about is that when it comes to innovation, uh, learn obviously from others, but recognize that oftentimes you have to be the pioneer. You have to be the first person to go to Philippi to plant the church. You have to be the first person to go to Antioch to plant the church, and allow the Spirit to lead you. And don't sit back and say, well, let us have some other examples of what we need to do. Much of what we've been talking about, and much of the future, Lord willing, when it comes to global engagement, innovation, and mission, those chapters in those books have not been written. And you're going to have to write those chapters as you go, and you need to write them, and you need to tell us, even as you're writing. Don't wait until you got it perfected. Get it out there, but don't be afraid to move forward.
Yeah, great encouragement, JD. And yeah, I think the innovation and mission community is really there for that purpose. The reason that I'm encouraging that and building that is because you're going to be out there in front leading and trying new things, and it's going to be scary sometimes. It's going to be hard. It's going to be rewarding, but you need people to celebrate with. You need people to ask you to pray for for each other, and you need people to encourage you and all those things. And so the last comment I'll make before we wrap up, and JD, I wonder if you'd pray for us at the end, is we will be continuing even this fall into the early spring before we launch into some more webinars and gear up towards the next big event, the bi-monthly Innovation and Mission newsletter. So if you go to innovationandmission.com, you can sign up to receive the bi-monthly newsletter, and twice a month I send out some links, some articles, some encouragement about innovation. If you send me some examples, I'd love to highlight some of the things you're doing as well. So please make sure to sign up for that and stay connected that way. So would you finish this up, JD?
Yeah, certainly. Before we pray, are there any other questions or anything that we needed to ask before we go, John? We covered
Don't
it
see
all.
anything else in there. I think we're good.
All right. I was just checking my notes. Didn't want to make sure that I didn't want to miss anything. All right. Well, hey, let me voice our prayer as we conclude today. Father, we do thank you so much just for your grace to all of us, whether we're participating right now in this live stream event or watching this recording at another time. And Lord, we just pray that we would be people that would walk in step with your Spirit. That Lord, that your heart, your desire, Lord, the mind of Christ would truly be developed within us. That we would not put together our schemes and plans and dreams and then take them to you, but rather we would draw near to your heart, and we would seek first your kingdom and your righteousness, whether we're in a local church or mission agency, whether we're leading an established church, we're church planters on the front lines, whatever, Lord, it may be. We just pray that we would seek first your heart, your kingdom, your righteousness, and that, Lord, you would guide our steps in days to come. And so, Father, we thank you for our brothers and sisters that have been with us today in this time. May you encourage them and use them in a powerful way to advance your gospel among the nations. And we pray all this in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. All right, everyone. Have a good day.
Bye.